wish we were chasing waterfalls somewhere in North Carolina. And I wish I was holding your hand while your hand was holding.
Welcome to another episode of the Tailwaters Fly Fishing Podcast. Today, we will be talking with Clint Waddell. Clint is a local fishing guide with a truly unique outlook on fishing. After a near-death experience, Clint was able to focus in on what he really wanted to do in life, and while still in the hospital, decided to book a spot at a guide school in Idaho and become a fishing guide. Not only is Clint now a guide for people of all skill levels, but he's uniquely able to guide people with disabilities and mobility issues. If you see Clint floating down the river, you may want to wave him into some of your favorite fishing holes instead of racing towards them, after hearing about some of the memories that he has helped to create. Now, without further ado, Clint Waddell. Well, Clint, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, John. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we're typically going to start these off with kind of a local fishing report, but you're not very local right now. So why don't you tell us where you're at and what kind of fishing you've been doing?
Yes, I'm currently in Holston, Montana, which is roughly 30 minutes outside of Missoula, Montana. And I was, in kind of preparing for this, I was looking back and thinking about the number of places that I've actually fished since honestly, just since the end of June. So I had a trout trip on the South Holston end of June, and then a Smalley trip on Holston proper on July 4th. And then there I've been to Tampa Bay going after juvenile tarpon, through South Dakota on the Vermilion River, Beaver Head, Montana, and Fish Creek. And then, matter of fact, just about 2 hours ago, got to catch a cutbow on the famed Blackfoot here in just kind of the outskirts of Missoula. And I'll be heading back down towards Three Forks to hit the Madison, and then going to Henry's Fork. And then eventually August 1st and 2nd, I'll be at the Flaming River Gorge in Utah before then heading back home for a guide trip on August 5th. So
Nice.
Lots of miles here under my feet recently.
That's awesome. Well, just in case it's helpful for any of our listeners or you when you get your feet back on the ground here, I'll just mention that the Upper Holston has been fishing really well. The sulfur hatch has been great. Holston in general has been pretty cool. The TVA has been releasing a lot of water. So if you're fishing midges, mayfly nymphs, terrestrials, that's all been going well. Streamer fishing during certain conditions and parts of the day. And then the Watauga has been fishing pretty well, nymphing or streamers and terrestrials again. So hopefully that's helpful, like I said, to our listeners or you on August 5th.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that the South Holston will be generating some water that day because that's the river of their choice. So let's hope we continue to get that water pushing through.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to kind of the main part of this podcast. And really what I'm hoping to do is get to know you and people like you, just in general, but also allow people to get to know you before ever stepping on your boat. For our listeners' benefit, I actually met you once on the river at the Blevins boat launch before I even thought about opening up a shop. And I still remember, one, it was pretty obvious that you have some pretty unique equipment. And then two, you had a really unique story and honestly seemed like a pretty nice dude. And it kind of stuck with me. But let's start with kind of where you're from and how you got into fly fishing.
Yeah, so I grew up and currently still reside in Meadowview, Virginia. So for those who don't know, it's the kind of the southwestern portion of Virginia, located in Washington County. Most folks would know either Bristol or Abingdon, and so I'm down closer in those corners. First picked up a fly rod, I'm going to guess somewhere around 1994. One of my best friends, still one of my best friends this day, Benji Barker, and his family had invited me, and we went up to Taylor's Valley there at the White Top Laurel section, and I was roughly 14 years old, I'm going to guess, and ended up buying my first fly rod from Bruce Wankel pretty shortly after. Who, for most folks in our area know Bruce with the Virginia Creeper Fly Shop, and at this time it was across the street before they'd widened Route 58 heading over towards Damascus. And Bruce is still one of my favorite people, and I try to spread the love as far as from buying from all of you guys when given the opportunity. But yeah, so got that, and got away from fly fishing once I got up to college. I did a freshman 30 pounds instead of the freshman 15, and got on a slippery slope of drinking and drugs, and fishing kind of fell behind me a little bit. And then I had a kind of a surgery that went wrong. Not kind of went wrong, it went really wrong in July of 2016. And while laying in a hospital, fighting for my life and being told that I'm going to lose my leg. Like, what is it that I really wish that I could do if I was going to get my health back? And whether I lost that leg or not, like, what is it that I really valued in life? And one of those things, so I came up with a bucket list of 3 items that I planned on doing. One was going to be, I really regretted not going to be a fly fishing guide when I had the opportunity in college. One of the summers, had an opportunity to go out to Wyoming, and long story short, a buddy and I had an opportunity to go together, and then he backed out. And well, at that time, I didn't feel like I wanted to go across the country by myself. So that was option or thing one on the bucket list that I really wish I'd done. Second one was to hike the entire AT. And the third, I still to this day cannot remember what it was. So I'm just leaving that one open, that I've still got a third bucket list item that I'm free to lie about later on when I figure out something else I want to do. And so, that was July of 16. While in the hospital at UVA, I went ahead and booked guide school in Victor, Idaho, for that following year. And, they did 3 different guide schools, and I chose the one that would be not on my son's birthday, but it ended up falling that I had to leave the day after his high school graduation. And just thank goodness the weather played out, that because at one point they thought they were going to change that to be on the day that I was going to be gone. It's like, oh, that's not good. He still doesn't let me forget that to this day, that I was still going to possibly miss that high school graduation and go to guide school.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's quite the story. And that's quite the story. If you're comfortable talking about it, what kind of conditions are you still dealing with? I assume that there's stuff that's going to kind of linger on for forever.
Yeah. So I mean, if anybody's got any questions, you or anybody else, I'm pretty much an open book. But July 5th of 2016, I was going in for abdominal hernia repair. So I had a golf ball sized hernia right above my belly button, and thinking like the best thing to do is to get it repaired while it's small before it became a bigger deal. So it's supposed to be an in and out same day surgery. Well, I got out of the hospital 42 days later.
Wow.
Upon the initial insertion of the trocar, they severed, or I should say they nicked my aorta, completely flatlined, took a total of 17 units of blood plus a cell saver. So they had to completely open me up. And I've actually got a gold graft holding my aorta together. Surgery was about 4 to 5 hours while they're trying to piece that back together. Well, so during that time, the lower portion of my body did not have blood flow. So once they connected that aorta back up and started getting this blood flow, well, the lower portion of my body had already started to die. So I developed something that's called compartment syndrome, and they didn't pick up on that for 3 days. I wish I could remember some of the actual terminology, but basically there's a test that they can run to see if you've got compartment syndrome, and 2 to 5,000 parts per million of this says that you've got acute compartment syndrome. I remember enough that mine was 54,000. So here I'm like, it's obvious that I've got this, but without trying to really place blame and put a potential lawsuit on me, let's just say that a local hospital group did not do what they should have done in making sure that that I was taking care of. Even one of the nurses in the ICU didn't document on me for over 11 hours. So thankfully, I got transferred to UVA on day 8. They'd done fasciotomies on my right leg, so I still have permanent foot drop, nerve damage, tendon contracture in my foot. So I've got, if I'm wearing boots, most folks can't tell. If I'm wearing shorts, then I get all kinds of looks. And so for that reason, I tend to not do that a whole lot. I kid around and, you've got all these sites where people are getting paid for all these, them showing their bodies and stuff. I said, I need to find somebody that's got a Franken fetish and I'll never have to work another day in my life. I look more like Frankenstein than I do Brad Pitt. So, but yeah, so I've got
Wow.
permanent foot drop, nerve damage. Front half of my foot feels like it's got electricity going through it. 95 to 99% of the time, and those are the biggest things. I've gone in for hernia repairs after that because they didn't repair the hernia at that point. All they were worried about at that point was keeping me alive. Had chronic DVTs, IV infiltration from Levofed. They put me on some major nerve meds to where I was max dose on those, and it was so bad that I thought that I was having memory issues based on being under anesthesia for so long. But it was true, like the nerve meds of gabapentin. That was just confusing me so much that if I fell asleep, I couldn't tell you if something happened, and if it did, couldn't tell you when. But all in
Yeah.
all, truly was a blessing for me that it changed my life, gave me a much better perspective. I don't drink, don't do drugs. I don't even put sugar in my coffee. Now eating Bojangles, that's a different story. So,
Well,
but yeah, it really, yeah, go ahead.
let me ask you this. I assume that there's some aspects of guiding that are, I don't know, hard or maybe painful or trigger something, I assume with some of those issues, guiding can be pretty difficult, or even just maybe sitting in the boat all day, may be tough. But I assume it's also pretty therapeutic. Could you maybe talk about both of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't physically, at this point, I don't feel limited by any of my conditions. Now, do I have worse balance? Absolutely. I'm missing a pretty good chunk of my right calf muscle. I can't even think of what that muscle is right now, but it's on the side of my leg. But as far as in my boat, I don't feel like that I'm limited at all. If I were wade fishing, I probably stumble a little bit more than the next guy. Therapeutic, absolutely. In which I ended up getting this Willie boat in July of 2021, where the stern of the boat actually folds down, and I can actually take folks in electric wheelchairs into the boat. And so, I feel like that my life has kind of come 360 and being given this second opportunity to appreciate life. And I'm truly even thankful for the problems that I do have, because I realize that the problems I have now are very mild considering what they could have been, or just not even being here at all. But so, like, I've getting this wheelchair accessible drift boat, I feel like that my part of my mission and purpose now is that I want to let others experience some hope and give them some purpose in life. And if I can just play a little bit of giving them a little bit of that, then my time here is going to be well served. So it's hard to be out on the water and have a bad day.
Yeah, yeah. I got to tell you, that first day that we saw you, I think that you had someone with a wheelchair on your boat that day. And when you're launching and you're looking at other boats at the ramp, you're kind of thinking like, which hole do I really want to get to and fish hard, and what do I have to do to get in position to do that, and maybe have to row down river or whatever. And you're kind of thinking about the boat behind you, but honestly, when I saw that, I just thought, shoot, I want to get whatever I'm doing, I want to hand over to you, because I just thought what you were doing was so cool and unique.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like that I may have had one of my old friends, Danielle Donnelly, in the boat that day.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I'm almost certain that that's who that was, um, and so I met her in college, and so she was dating one of my best friends, and she was drinking and driving and got thrown from the vehicle and is now paralyzed, like from the belly button down, basically.
Wow.
And she's just another one. Actually, she came to see me at UVA when I'm in the hospital. So I had her, had one of my good friends, Jeff Smith, who I'll talk about here in a little bit, who was blind, and then I had another an occupational therapy assistant that used to work with me at Blue Mountain. That those three individuals, and so he was born with spina bifida, but still was working, and he would either use crutches or his wheelchair to complete his job. So to have those three individuals around me visiting me while I'm sitting here like, oh, I might lose my leg, wah, it's very hard to feel sorry for yourself when you've got folks, three people immediately around me that, in my opinion, have life much harder than I would even have it if I lost my leg. So I believe that God's timing for me was very important for having those people around me then. And I still keep in touch with those individuals, and some of them on a weekly basis.
That's amazing perspective. And it's cool that you've been able to take some of those people out on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, looking at your social media makes me happy. Social media is social media, but I've seen some of the people that you fished with. I've seen some of the pictures of you fishing with those people and others. I've seen pictures of children that you've taken out with disabilities. And looking at a picture is great, but I feel like it's a small fraction of the sense of how rewarding that actually is. Could you maybe talk about that? It's probably hard to put into words, but maybe just do your best.
Yeah. And so, knowing that we were going to talk about some of these things, I sat there and I tried to figure out, like, well, which ones mean the most to me? And I can't, so I'm going to talk about several. So if people want to get bored, they might just want to fast forward a little bit. But so Jeff Smith, like I said, he's blind. He's been blind since I believe it was 24 due to disease from diabetes. It's honestly become one of my best friends. And I've known Jeff since I was 5. I'm now 47 and Jeff is 57. But I took him out on the boat thinking, like, man, like if I really want to work on my guide skills, what better way, because like we don't want to take the rod out of somebody's hand to visibly show them, right? Like we want to coach them verbally, because if we
Mm-hmm.
take that rod out of their hand, well, what happens if we catch the fish? And that has happened to me, and I don't ever want that to happen again. So like taking Jeff out, like, hey buddy, like, are you down for trying to learn to do this? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Well, taking him out, and his very first time out, he caught 7 trout on a dry fly, and we were there on we call the pond, above the weirs and below the main dam there, and
Mm-hmm.
getting him to get that rhythm, and then determining the front of the boat there is going to be 12 o'clock, and getting him to understand where 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, where all that might be, and then getting the feel of the cast, getting that rhythm, and then being able to tell him to set as soon as I see that fish go up and eat that dry fly. And then, fighting. Now, I think that, he missed the first couple, and then I know that there were some fish that got off. But the experience of him landing that first fish, and which, if you even, and I can send you the link, but if you Google blind Tennessee fly fisherman, you'll pick up on a story there that the news picked up off my Facebook and called and interviewed Jeff. And you can see a video. And I say, well, Jeff, tell us what you've got there. And he said, well, you say it's a rainbow trout, and which I still find hilarious, because years later he says, well, you know why I answered it that way, right? And I was like, nobody. I was like, I really don't. He said, well, because knowing you the way that you prank me, you could have had me holding a catfish and making me look like an idiot all over the internet. And I was like, well, good point. And so I've taken Jeff multiple times since then, and he's caught fish on every trip. And sometimes I honestly, I forget that Jeff's blind. So I'm visiting our CPA here in Missoula, or outside of Missoula, and she went on a trip with Jeff and I, and she was in the front of the boat, Jeff's in the back of the boat. And I was paying so much attention to her that I forget Jeff's in the back of the boat. And he finally says, "Hey, Clint, I think I've got another one." It's like, buddy's like, "I am so sorry. You're right. You do." So, he's back there bottom bouncing and he's got a fish on without me coaching him at all. And so it's just amazing that, one, I wish that more people felt like that they could get out and be successful fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But even if they can't, realizing that success looks different on all of us. And I think that that's one thing that I enjoy most about some of the clientele that I take out. Their definition of success and enjoyment is not if they catch a fish or not. Like, they're just doing something that they didn't think would be possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can remember that I had, if you look up leospride.org, Leo, like, the only thing that Leo can do is move his eyes. And so, he's communicating through our Twitch software and so much stuff that's above my ability to even explain. But his dad had reached out to me because they're at the South Holston Fly Shop. They told them about my boat, and the dad called me and said, he's like, "They're telling me that you've got a wheelchair accessible drift boat and that you might be able to take us out." And he explained all of the diagnosis of his son and all of this. I was like, "Oh yeah," I was like, "Absolutely." And you know, Leo's got a trach. Leo has he's in a chair. I mean, like, and it's more like a stroller type chair. So he's leaned back and to the point, like, when his dad would get a fish, I would actually step out of the boat onto the side that Leo's head was facing, so I could show Leo what I was doing. I would
Oh,
stand out in the river and show him the fish. I would stand there and I would tie the flies. And Leo's nonverbal, and they didn't bring his communicating device out there, I guess, due to the fear of getting it wet
mm-hmm.
and damaging it. But I remember his dad said, "Leo, you're having an awesome time. You've not stopped talking since you've been on the boat." And knowing that, I mean, we only floated from the sheep pen down to mud hole. So, I mean, what are we talking? Quarter of a mile tops.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more out of me just making sure I had them on water that I felt safe on and that we wouldn't have any issues. Because, I mean, truly a medically fragile kid. But I wanted to take that risk. Would my insurance approve of that? Absolutely not. But like those, like, I was telling my CPA today about that story, and she's like, "Well, that's awesome that you did that." I was like, yeah, I mean, it's one of those stories that stick with you. And like I said, for the listeners out there, if they go to leospride.org, they'll see the story that Leo and his amazing family that continue to push Leo in all these different ventures in life. And, like, it's an amazing story of Leo and, like I said, his family, that they're doing everything they can to give opportunities and access for other folks like Leo. So, I think of
That's
those
amazing.
stories. Like, there's no, and Leo's family, they're one of those that, they could pay for the trip, but so many of them that I get, and that, like, I feel like donate. I'd say I probably donate about 50% of the trips that I take, and I'm just very fortunate. I don't even know if fortunate's the right word. I feel like I've truly been blessed to be in a position that I am to be able to offer those trips.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from, good buddy Matt Stewart, who's also with spina bifida, an electric wheelchair, to be able to get him out on the river. And he has since lost a limb, and we've not been able to get out there since that's happened. But being able to see the life come out of people while they're out there, and it's, if you want to get to know somebody, spend some time on the water.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get down to core beliefs of individual, go fly fishing. I'm a big believer that if you can't believe in a creator that's bigger than us, by going out and being in nature and talking about the life cycle of mayflies and trout and this continuous never-ending water supply that's going under us, then you're not ever going to believe in anything bigger than yourself. And so I just love having that opportunity to get out and do that.
Yeah. And I think, I feel like it's really rewarding when I take friends out who, maybe they don't have those same limitations. Maybe just getting on the water is a mix up from, kind of your day to day routine and being inside a building, almost every waking hour. And it's fun because they're extremely memorable moments. But I feel like what you're doing is just 100 times that. It's pretty amazing. One thing I wanted to just highlight again, we talked about this a little bit before the call, but people with disabilities are often the people who are least able to pay for a guide trip. And so if any of our listeners or anybody hears about you and, I don't know, falls into some money, wins a scratcher or something like that, can they contact you and sponsor a day with someone who might otherwise be unable to go?
100%. And if that's something that they want to do, there's several ways they can reach out to me. So they can get in touch with me by email with flyfishing@bluemountaintherapy.com. They can find me at Blue Mountain Fly Fishing on social media. Find me with Clint Waddell on Instagram or Facebook. But then I founded an equine assisted therapy program that's a nonprofit. It's a true 501c3. And if they want to donate with the ability to get an actual tax deduction, they can donate there as well. And so that would, they have the ability to do that. Like I said, being a 501c3, they're able to do that. And they could reach out at barnes@bluemountain.org. And I know that people want to give for the right reasons, but sometimes people are a little more incentivized to give if they know that they're able to donate to a nonprofit and get a little bit of that money back through taxes.
Now, maybe they could donate too in that case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Donate to either program. But yeah, if they wanted to donate that way, then they can just specify that it's for the fly fishing trip.
Great. We've talked a lot about kind of some of your ADA clients and that aspect of your guiding. One other thing I did want to just let people know about is you, and partially because of that ability to pay, you guide people of all physical abilities, but you're just kind of uniquely able to guide those people with those specific client needs. Is that kind of the right way to frame things?
Correct. Yes. I take plenty of able-bodied folks. I would say right now I'm probably taking 75% of able-bodied and, probably 25% of those with some sort of accessibility issues or, you hate to use the word disability, or at least I hate to use the word disability. It's because I guess focusing on the positive side of things, like saying all abilities. But yeah, I mean, I've had folks who out on the water, 100 days a year, and they just need somebody to row the boat and put them in good position. And then I do lots of first timers, and I really enjoy taking those who have never been fly fishing. You can teach them, from the first time they're seeing how small a size 22 zebra midge is, they're on one of those tailwaters, and they're just completely amazed, like, you're kidding me, right? To them landing their first fish. And very, very fortunate to have the Watauga River and South Holston River right there in the backyard, and the number of fish per mile gives you a pretty good chance at success. And I think that since 2017, I think I've had 3 people total that have not caught fish, and some of those might be my fault. And I can certainly say that 2 of them that come to mind were not my fault, that they just could not react fast enough. So it's funny even thinking about some of those. One of those being one of my good friends, and I'm sitting there saying, like, set the hook, and still not saying. He's like, well, I didn't see it move. Like, man, like, it's completely underwater for like 3 seconds, and we still didn't get him.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah, no, it would certainly be appreciated if they wanted to donate and sponsor a trip, or if they have somebody in their life that they want to take out. There's plenty of sons who want to take their parents or grandparents out, and just getting in and out of my boat is just a little bit easier. Like, they may not be in a chair, But it might make it easier getting in and out of the boat. Like here within the past month, I just got through taking Pat and Paul from over there at Taylor's Valley on a trip that I donated for through my church. But they did a fundraiser and trying, Taylor's Valley being really impacted by Hurricane Helene. But I had a 90-year-old and 88-year-old, and we actually went on a spin fishing trip for smallmouth. And to know that those individuals were able to get in and out of the boat a lot easier than trying to climb over. It doesn't have to be wheelchair bound or anything like that.
That's a really good point. And that just kind of brings back a memory. The place I'm living in now, the prior owner of that, Harry Bales, he had a long fight with cancer, and I was able to take him out. And we just rode one of the flats here on the Holston, kind of in the last couple of years of his life. And I really remember how hard it was getting him in the boat and how worried I was during that whole process. So that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
And I'll
Yeah.
say this, I've got several guide friends that they also know that they can use my boat. If my boat's not being used, they can use my boat for that type of clientele that may need it.
Oh, wow.
And I'll open that up to you. So if you ever need that as well, it's certainly an option.
Well, thanks a ton. I really appreciate that. That's huge. Um, for some of the able-bodied people out there who just want to go on a normal fly fishing trip, maybe could you talk a little bit about the species that you target and kind of general bodies of water? You mentioned the South Holston, Watauga, and just kind of what to expect in general.
Yeah, so for trout fishing, I typically am fishing the Watauga and South Holston. You're not going to find many better fisheries than those two. Smallmouth, like Holston proper, say like, Churchill area. That's probably the number one spot that I'm hitting for that, and that's spin or terminal tackle there. I do prefer fly fishing personally. But sometimes, so, like even with my grandmother, like if it's someone who you don't feel like that can cast, or maybe, they're like, well, hey, I've never tried fly fishing, but I would rather just go and catch some fish, and I just want to spin fish. We've got options to do either spin or fly on any of the rivers. So it's those are my favorite species. But I'll also say that wherever I'm fishing and whatever I'm fishing for tends to be my favorite species. I can really just live in the moment and have fun. Dan Rice with River Feet, I take some trips through him, and we actually had clients who wanted to go bluegill fishing for their first trip. And because they were like, we want the kids to have some success, and let's just do that. Man, that was still a great trip. And not a whole lot of pressure, like it's, but it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so those would be the three main stretches of water that I personally go out and fish on with clients.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And maybe to put some words in your mouth, I know it's fly fishing, it's a guide trip, and results are important, but I assume that you have a pretty unique appreciation for the fishing, and I would assume that's probably pretty infectious on your boat. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. Kind of my things, we'll get in the boat and we'll talk about what expectations are, right? So like you want to make sure that even when booking that trip, that you're a good fit for the folks that are booking with you, and vice versa. So laying out those expectations, number one is we want everybody to be safe. The worst thing you could do is have an injury or, heaven forbid, a death. But second, I want to have fun. Third, I want to teach something, because I also don't want them to feel like that they have to have a guide for them to be successful in fly fishing or terminal fishing, whatever it might be, going forward. So I want them to understand where the fish are, how we're going to determine what we're fishing with. Why are we fishing with dry flies, or why are we fishing with nymphs or streamers, or why do we have a bobber, or why are we doing inline? Like, why are we doing what we're doing? So then that way, if they're not with me and they want to get into fly fishing, hopefully they got a foundation of an understanding that they can go out and do some of this on their own. And then lastly, you want to catch. And so that's kind of the fourth piece of the day. And you kind of hope that you're able to be a good teacher and show them a thing or two that they are able to put all of that together and be successful on landing a fish.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for people, probably more for people who have done a little fly fishing before, is there anything that you see on a regular basis that makes you think of something that you might recommend to someone and to kind of help prepare for having a good day on the boat with you? Whether it's, sure, casting and mending are probably two common ones, but anything that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, I think just being patient and
Hmm.
I think that sometimes we can be in a little bit of a world of instant gratification. And it's one of those, like, just kind of trust us with the process. So if you've never fished the South Holston or the Watauga, I mean, we're going to be fishing a lot of times much smaller bugs. But yeah, just kind of trust the process. And I kind of take the philosophy of Socrates, and I only know that I know nothing. Um, and so if we could all realize that we could learn something from everyone, and that every day is different. I think that's kind of the biggest piece. Like, coming to the day, being willing to learn, be willing to try some things that maybe you've not tried before, and then at the same time, I'm willing to sit back and folks in the boat. I've learned a ton of stuff from clients that have been in the boat, or just fishing with buddies. And just because I do one thing one way doesn't mean that that's going to be the best way or the right way.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good advice. That's awesome. Um, is so I'm a huge nerd when it comes to fly fishing, and I thought I'd ask: are there any technical details that you really kind of nerd out over or get really techie on, whether it's flies, leaders, lines, your boat setup, anything that kind of comes to mind?
There's probably not anything that I nerd out on. I just find that there are times that I will key in on something different. So I feel like I get bored easily. And so I'll find that I play games with myself, and sometimes even with the fish and whoever it is that I've got out in the boat. I'm thinking of one fellow who has been a very good friend of mine, started out as a client that has now been with me, I think, for 6 or 7 trips. And when you get a fish that's feeding and you spot that one fish, I start counting how long it's been between the time that that fish eats and when that fish eats again. And so I remember Jeff was, this is not my buddy who was blind, but this is a fellow up in the Roanoke area. And I'm telling Jeff, I was like, hey, buddy, like, I want you to cast, towards that tree, and I want you to be ready. I want you to cast about 5 to 7 feet up above it, upstream of it. And I want you to be ready to put it out there when I say when. And so I put it out there, and he doesn't know that I've been watching this fish, and I've counted this fish, and he's eaten on a cycle of, I feel like, looking back on it, it was somewhere around like 7 to 10 seconds. And I get him to cast this up there, and I said, all right, be ready. 3, 2, 1. And then, I kid you not, the fish played its part. Jeff was ready. He sets the hook, and he talks about that every time he gets in my boat. And I love playing games like when you see a fish that you want to eat and you're able to really figure out, like, this fish is dialed in. He's not moving more than a couple of feet for his food, and it's on a count. So I kind of nerd out on picking a fish and wanting to get that fish, and just knowing, like, hey, you really didn't just blindly catch that fish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's awesome. Um, talking about advice and that kind of thing, maybe for those people who may not be able to afford a guide trip or may not have an interest in a guide trip, is there anything that you would pass on to kind of the weekend warrior wade fisherman, or even if it's just a few flies to throw over the next month or so?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, like, we can all geek out and You want to be gearheads or whatever terminology we talk about, where we want to buy all the fancy tools, but just keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up some rocks when you get in the water. See what's under there. Slow down, look around. Don't jump in the water and there's my hole. I don't know how many times that I've spooked fish and I've walked over fish trying to get to fish. But take a look on the bank, look on the tree branches and see what bugs are there. Shake that tree branch and see what might fly off of it. But pick up those rocks, see what's in there. If you don't already have a small seine, buy you a piece of cheesecloth and wrap it around a couple of sticks and put it down in the water, kick some rocks and see what bugs are in there. Typically, what you see the most of is what you should fish with. So we talked about midges and those on the South Holston. Will pick out that color and size that matches closest to that and throw it. So personally, I feel like that you could throw a pheasant tail or a variant of a pheasant tail just about anywhere, and that
Mm-hmm.
being a good fly. So yeah, really just kind of keep it simple. When in doubt, go smaller
Mm-hmm.
and go deeper. So if what is it? They say that 80% of a trout's diet is underwater. I feel like it's probably more than that. I feel like it's probably a lot more than that. So yeah, fish underwater unless you see those fish keying in on bugs on the top. Throw some weight, whether you're using yarn or bobbers or a dry dropper, but try to get those flies down in the water column that those fish are most likely in. But yeah, don't be afraid to try something new. At the same time, I think just keeping it simple and getting those flies down in their depth of water and something that's similar. And we can, how many fly patterns are there? Thousands, tens of thousands. Good old
Mm-hmm.
pheasant tail is probably going to work um, 95% of the time.
That's great advice. I love it. I love it. Well, one other thing I wanted to talk about is the Blue Ridge Guide Association. And as if you didn't have enough going on, you recently became one of the co presidents for the Blue Ridge Guide Association. And so maybe I'll take 1 or 2 seconds here. So for those who don't know, it's a great organization that effectively allows all the local guides to organize and communicate as one. And they also do some really cool projects. So they help organize river cleanups every year, and they're at least partially responsible, along with kind of our local TU chapter, the Over Mountain Trout Unlimited chapter, for installing some stream temperature monitors, which are really important for kind of helping to keep track of and provide transparency on water temperatures and help some of the flow issues around here. So, is there anything that you'd like to say about Blue Ridge Guide Association, or are you still kind of just getting your feet wet?
Yeah, definitely want to talk about them a little bit. So you can find more info at blueridgeguide.org. But when you're talking about those water temperature monitors, so there's 3 on the South Holston and 3 on the Watauga. Those have really helped give some real live data to be able to take to TVA and try to be a partner with them, because the fly fishing industry in our area generates a lot of revenue, and then a lot of revenue that even just trickles off of that, whether it be lodging, whether it be restaurants, um, campgrounds, fly shops, guide trips. You think about shuttle drivers. I mean, like, there's so much money that comes into our area because these are both wonderful tailwaters with great fish, great numbers of fish, and we don't want to waste that. So having those temperature gauges allows us to say, like, hey guys, like, the water is really getting like dangerously warm. In some of the areas, like, they would have already had, they would have turned off trout fishing if we were talking about, say, out here on the Snake River. So being able to take that information and send that to some of the contacts at TVA, and then trying to also get TWRA involved, like, that's huge. So having TU be part of that and some of the donors that have worked with us on getting those in, huge. Um,
Yeah.
but you kind of making sure that we're all a united front. Like, it's very easy for individual politics to get in the way of like big picture stuff. Like we need to really focus on that mission of trying to conserve those rivers and waters so that the fish being like what's most important. I mean, it might say Blue Ridge Guide Association, but to me, having the water flows for the fish is more important than having enough water for a drift boat to float down the river. I would rather have a minimum flow so that the fish are going to thrive, even if there's not enough water for drift boats to take those recreational flows down. I feel like that we can all adapt and figure out ways to get in there and catch fish, whether that be wade trips or we just have to wait until there is enough water to go down. But, we can't allow that river to lose the quality fish that resource is there on the Watauga and the South Holston River. And, that plays a big part in all of the headwaters that flow into those.
Yeah, yeah. You hit on a couple things I'll kind of circle back to and piggyback off of. One, I'll mention kind of reemphasize the importance of that one voice. And I mean, even at the very least, when I see high temperatures or when, something unique is going on at the dam, it's really nice. Historically, John Hooper was the president, and thank you, John, for all the work that you've done. But when John Hooper reaches out to TVA and then passes the message along to everybody, like, that is incredibly helpful. And then another thing that you had mentioned on, and maybe to provide a little more context to everybody, is the water temperature. We've seen some lower minimum flows here in recent years than we did historically. I remember back in probably 2020, wading the lower Holston and getting my thermometer out and reading a temperature that was like 69 degrees, during the summer on low water. And one thing that's huge for those temperature gauges is if that happens, it's not now John kind of saying like, hey, look at what I saw. There's real data that 100 or 1,000 people can point to and try and push things to get corrected pretty quickly. Because getting back to another one of your points, this is a great area to fish. The fishing's phenomenal. It's not a super affluent area, and anything that we can help to bring in is really impactful for the community. And if you're traveling here, go fishing and enjoy that, and then stop in Bluff City, eat at Paisley's Pizza. Plan accordingly and help support the local community. But it's all kind of tied together, and the Blue Ridge Guide Association is a really helpful voice in kind of advocating for a lot of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, for anybody that wants to even see that data, they can go to that blueridgeguide.org, and there are links to that live data for the temperature. And so it's a huge benefit. And I just want to say I'm a recent addition to this board. So you're talking about John Hooper, and I mean, John has done an incredible job, and I really wish that John was still the president. No offense to myself and my co-president, but it was not something that I lobbied for or asked for at all. It was just one of those that they knew that I had some experience, being that I'm on 2 other nonprofit boards, that they thought that might really help. And really just trying to give some structure and guidance to those guys and take a lot of that weight off of John. But I'll say this, John is still doing more than I'm doing, and he's not the president. So old habits die hard. So John, yes, really appreciate you. And the rest of the guys on there as well. Matt Manus has done an excellent job of continuing to be the vice president. And like I said, it's all the guys that are on there. I am probably the least deserving and probably the least knowledgeable person on that board.
Well, let me just say from a bunch of us, thank you to everyone on that board, everyone who's helped out for anything, and thank you, Clint, for all the work that you're about to do.
Thanks, I think. And I want to throw one little plug in here real quick. So I've got one little friend of mine that's I think the first time that he went fishing with me, I'm only going to call him out by the first name of Sage. Sage was diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And so Sage has been out on the boat with me a few times. And I know that I'd already talked to his mom to make sure it was okay that I shared some of the stories about Sage. But making sure that that we really don't forget about these folks who have a diagnosis or who might be a little less able to do some of the things that we take for granted. Like if you see somebody who has a disability or even if you just feel like somebody's down in the dumps. I mean, like you don't have to have somebody be a disability before you go over and say, hey, but sometimes people don't know how to interact with somebody who has a disability. Like my buddy Jeff, that's blind. He says, if you see somebody that's blind, please go up to them and say something to them. There's plenty of times that people talk around me. But Sage has been on the boat with me as recent as I think about 2 months ago. But first time I took him out, he's out there in a safari outfit. And he's more interested in bugs than he was the fish. And but Sage, I know when you're listening, buddy, when you hear this, give me a text.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, one thing I wanted to mention, Clint, we're just over 9 years past your hernia repair, July 5th, 2016. Do you have anything special planned for your 10-year anniversary?
I don't think that far enough ahead. I am very spontaneous and I change my mind a lot. Like I said, I get bored, but I will say that I did recently start my six-pack captain's license. I have just this past January, I was able to hit my 50th state. So my son and I have hit 49 states together, and I was able to hit my 50th state. And I hope that next year, I might change my mind between now and then, but I hope that next year I'm able to take my first international fly fishing trip. So I'm certainly open to people to reach out to me and give me ideas and suggestions. And if anybody wants to make a group trip of it, let's get something scheduled around July 5th of 2026, if good Lord's willing, and I'm still here and able to do that.
That's great. That's great. Well, this area has a ton of really unique and talented people in general, but especially as it applies to fly fishing, and you're definitely one of them. So thank you a ton for taking the time and kind of sharing your story a little bit. If someone wants to go with you or sponsor a trip for someone in need, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'll throw my cell number out there, 276-696-2210, text or call. You could also reach me, like I said, flyfishing at bluemountaintherapy.com. Facebook, Instagram, Blue Mountain Fly Fishing, or Clint Waddell, and that's Waddell. But John, you and I have talked several times. You have a very unique approach in that I feel like that you're trying to do a we, not me approach. And so I'm a big believer that time is our most valuable asset. And I try to be very appreciative of folks that give me their time, and I try to be very careful of who I give my time to. And I'm happy to give you my time and very appreciative that you were able to give me yours. I've enjoyed every chance that I've been around you and hope to have more of that.
Well, thanks a ton, Clint. I really appreciate that.
So yeah, let's hope that people go and support your fly shop. You've got a very unique approach to how you're doing it, and that's not taken away from any of the other fly shops around, but it seems like you really focus a lot on the fly tire, and I'm grateful for that. I've got a lot of my friends that think an awful lot of you and your shop and your approach.
Thanks a lot.
And how that fire's burning hot, but it can't keep up with your touch. So girl, come on